Today, we take a look at some of the things that make the Adidas Adistar unique and who it might work for. Hey everyone, Matt here from Doctors of Running, and today we're going to do an overview of the Adidas Adistar, focusing on some biomechanical thoughts and who this shoe might work for. This was a very unique shoe. It was something I was paying attention to for a long time. I used to run in the older version, or one of the older versions, the Adidas Adistar here, which was a true, traditionally but unique posted shoe. As you can see, this solid post right here in the rear foot. I still have a pair of these. I got them for 40 bucks on Amazon, not on Amazon, on eBay. Great deal. They're durable. They last really long. Different than today's shoes, not as maximalist, but still plenty of cushioning. It was interesting to run in these just to compare for this, but these are night and day. So this is no longer a stability shoe technically. We'll talk about some guidance features here about why it might work for those who need stability, but this is technically a neutral maximalist shoe, but I wouldn't call it that. I would call it a guidance maximalist shoe based on some factors we're going to talk about. It's a huge shoe. Just going over some specs really quickly. A men's size 9 is 11.2 ounces. Women's size 8 is 10 ounces. There's a 36 millimeter stack height in the heel, 30 in the forefoot for a 6 millimeter drop. Honestly, it feels a little bit higher than that initially, just because the firmer rear foot foam, the Repetitor Plus foam, firmer in the back, softer in the front. It feels almost like a higher heel drop just because this foam doesn't compress as much, but if you land farther forward, it's not as much of a problem. Really quick, again, I'm not going to go into great detail on some of the traditional review stuff here because I've written a review that you guys can go check out, guys and gals. But the whole thing is thick. I would describe this shoe as a thick shoe. Tons of cushioning, thick upper. It's got a lower volume upper. There's still some width there, but it sits low against the foot. So people with a variety of foot types should work well here unless you've got super wide feet. You should be fine just because, yeah, it looks like almost a casual shoe, which I've worn it for as that a couple times. But moving on from that, so it's a unique ride in that if you land farther forward, you're going to feel this really nice, softer foam up front, the Repetitor foam, and it feels really good. There's a solid transition off the forefoot. It is pretty stiff. There's not flexibility here. There's a significant rocker throughout the sole. Again, there's significant heel bevel, significant toe spring. So it's not meant to be a flexible ride. It's a maximalist shoe, which with that much stack height, you do need to have a rocker because it's so stiff. You got to have something to replace the ankle rockers that can't work the same way. So that's why you need something to maintain that transition. That's where the heel bevel and the toe spring come in. So they're pretty significant. If you are sensitive to those, this is not going to be a shoe for you just because they are very rigid and you definitely need them. What makes this shoe interesting is the different densities of foam, is that the Repetitor foam is so soft and the rear foot is so firm. So yes, it does give you a really nice stable landing, but it is very clunky initially, and has continued to be so. So I've discovered people who land farther forward are probably going to do a lot better because really nice, responsive, soft foam that you land on, it kind of rolls you forward. Rear foot is solid, stable, and clunky. So if you really want a stable heel, this is going to be your shoe. But if you don't work well with clunky heels like me, this is going to be a little bit rough. Now, I don't dislike this shoe. I just think there's some things that need to be worked on. So moving into the heel a little bit more, I said this is not a stability shoe, but it will function for those who need guidance. And why is that? So first of all, the foot actually sits way deeper down than the midsole would tell you. So the sidewalls here are super significant. Your foot sits way down there. You've got stuff on both the medial and the lateral side that your foot sits to, and they're like guide rails or like sidewalls. They go almost the full length into the midfoot. And yeah, when you're leaning coming down, there's nowhere for your foot to go but forwards. So yeah, that's really nice. It does guide it really well. There is a little bit more material on the medial than the lateral side, but people that go either direction are going to do well here if you need stability or guidance in the rear foot. The second thing you're going to find is that the sole is super wide. This shoe is huge, by the way. And this is coming from someone that's tested a lot of Hokas. This is a big shoe. So very wide last. Midfoot does not narrow very much, so it stays really naturally stable. And there's this huge guidance line through here. So if you can get up to speed a little bit, it does help you transition forward fairly well. That's if you can get past the heel. The last thing that does really well is there is a significant posterior lateral heel bevel. We know from some evidence from Ben O'Nig that if this can create a lateral bias, which again, for those that tend to go inward too much, this will help you stay a little bit more centered on, or just a little bit more on the outside. Now, I really like how these are done, except for the fact that there's a significant posterior flare here. Yes, there's a bevel, but there's a ton of material back here, and it is so stiff that it ends up being a little bit clunky, which is why I didn't understand why they didn't just have full-length repetitor foam. But I kind of do understand, because for people that want a super stable heel, this shoe is going to work really well for. And there are some people that just have super unstable rear foots. That's just who you are. And you may not pronate, supinate, you may do both, whatever. If you have an unstable calcaneus, this is going to be your shoe, because the rear foot is so rigid that when you land, there is nowhere for your heel to go but forwards. This doesn't overly stabilize you, so it doesn't push you in one direction. So those with knee issues that are sensitive to stability, this is going to be fine. You're going to be great, because it's not a post in either direction, but the sidewalls support the heel really well. And again, you've got nowhere to go but forward. The problem is, like I said, it's just super clunky. So people that need a ton of rear foot stability that don't like posting, this is actually going to work really, really well for you. But you just have to deal with the fact that the shoe is heavy, and trying to transition through the heel is a little bit clunky unless you need that stiffness. And that's the thing about stability, is if you make a shoe too stable, it starts to get clunky because there's no flexibility. It becomes too rigid. Whereas when you have the opposite thing, where it just becomes so flexible, right? Oftentimes, not always, it can be unstable because there's just so much freedom. So there's a balance to these things. Certain people will need different things. And this is, again, rear foot stability. Now, if you land farther forwards, you're going to do really well in this shoe, regardless of your foot type, or not foot type. But the repetitor foam is really nice and smooth. When I get up on my toes, which is not the easiest in this shoe, it's a smooth ride from the midfoot forwards. So people that land further forwards, that don't need stability or anything like that, and just want a solid maximal cushion shoe, you might like this shoe if you can handle the weight. Now, Adidas is billing this as an ultra or a long run shoe. And yeah, it could do that. I think if you have a shorter stride, for those people that have a longer stride like myself, it's going to take a lot more work from your hips to try to lift this shoe up and get it down on the ground. It's got a nice foam. I used responsive earlier. That's really not the right word. And this is not a responsive shoe, but it's a cushion shoe and it's a protective shoe. So yeah, those people with a shorter stride, maybe higher cadence, are going to do well because they'll probably use the rocker a little bit better. But those people with a longer stride, they have to lift this, may not like the shoe as much just because it is very, very heavy. It's not uncomfortable other than the heel, which for me is uncomfortable, but it is a heavier ride that didn't really work as well for me. I wanted to run in it. I wanted to test it out. I want to get its full miles. This is my right shoe, and my left one looks almost exactly the same in terms of, so durability is actually really good. But biomechanically, it's just a shoe that doesn't work for me because it's so heavy and the heel is so stiff. So, but it's interesting, and it's cool to see companies thinking about stability differently. And you've seen that the Nike structure, to be honest with you, I haven't reviewed the 24 because it's really not that different from the 23, and I really wasn't overly impressed with that shoe. This impresses me more because even though it's not a stability shoe, you've still got a lot of methods here that create a stable and guided ride, which is really nice. And I think that's where the industry needs to go. Instead of going, hey, we have a specific stability shoe, let's create something that will provide guidance and stability for those who need it, but also provide a structured shoe or more cushion or whatever you want to call it, a more structured shoe that works for a larger variety of people. And that's hard because people are so different. How are you going to create a shoe that adapts to different people's feet? And I think some of the guidelines, the guide rails, the sidewalls do a better job of doing that. So I do like the shoe for that. Just Adidas, you got to smooth out the heel. And I think if you take the heel bevel and move it forwards, or if you get rid of this posterior flare, that's going to solve a lot of this. It'll also reduce a significant amount of weight, and it'll also make the shoe feel a little bit less biased in the rear foot, because there's a lot of weight back here. And while I like getting up front because it feels better, I just get pulled back here because there's so much weight, and having an unbalanced weight in the shoe does tend to pull you backwards. So rear foot strikers, again, you're going to need to want a shoe that has really stiff in the rear foot and is kind of a little clunky transition because you want that stability. If you don't like that, and a smooth heel bevel and a smooth transition is really important to you, even though there is a big one here, this may be a shoe you might want to pass on. But those who land a little farther forward that want some solid cush and a really protective shoe, this is going to be a good option. Landing farther forward is really good. And like I said, those people who need guidance and don't like posts, this is going to be a great shoe for you. There's really solid sidewalls here. There's a significant guideline through here, through the shoe. The sole is really wide. It's a very stable foundation. And there is a significant posterior lateral heel bevel, which will help with that. It's just this, for the millionth time I'm going to say this, a little clunky. So I am impressed. I like what I'm seeing. It just, there's some finessing needs to do on the rear foot, and then it's going to smooth out the rest of the shoe. So that's the biomechanical thoughts on the Adidas Adistar. We're going to have a lot more comments like this because we're cranking out reviews on the website, and we'd like to give you guys and gals and people some unique thoughts on YouTube, because why are we going to create something that's you can already go read? So I'm going to try to dive into a little bit more stuff on shoes and what makes them unique, and what I see as a doctor of physical therapy, and now as a PhD student, try to unravel some of this stuff in terms of biomechanics. So I hope you found this helpful. We're going to have a lot of guides coming out this year because we're going to see a little lull in the number of shoes that we have coming our way because of the supply chain issues. So I really want you guys to give feedback on what you want to see. So please comment below if there's any shoes that we missed that you might want to see reviews on, if there's any things you want us to talk more about. We're going to do a couple more injury stuff, more on the podcast and when we get our roundtable together. But I really want to encourage some feedback, because the whole point of this website is to teach and to learn. So I learn just as much as all of you when I get to test all these shoes and I reinforce and I have to look up the research on this stuff. But I want to take all of you along for this journey and help you learn. The goal of this website is to help you learn more about the stuff that's out here, break through the marketing, learn more about your body, and figure out what works best for you. So if you have any feedback on things you want to hear about, please let us know. As always, we got some cool stuff coming. Stick around, and thanks for watching.